Marty.
Hey.
So we've got a fun episode coming up for the peeps today.
Yeah, it's basically just storytelling about times that we've gone way outside the culture.
Yeah, we figured that when we all tell each other stories about going outside culture, we kind of give each other permission to do it more.
Yeah, so today you're going to hear stories about invisible whales, public nose picking, polygamy, always a standby, yes. Many stories.
We even developed a new word for our bewildered community now, which is the cahoot.
The cahoot. It's fabulous. You are fabulous cahootners. So let's get started. Hi, I'm Martha Beck.
And I'm Rowan Mangan, and this is another episode of Bewildered. That's right, the podcast for people trying to figure it out.
So many people.
So much to figure out.
So much.
Yes.
Why? What are you trying to figure out?
You know, I'd like to say I'm trying to figure out something original, but once again, where I find myself at this juncture, Marty, is mired in the endless, infinite mystery that is your relationship with other people scrolling social media. I just, it's so baffling to me. It's so baffling to me. And why does it always end up with animals as well? Like, it's this strange thing. All right, we've gone down a few rabbit holes with talking parrots lately.
No, you just mentioned rabbit holes again. Everything's about animals. It can't be helped.
So one night recently, we're lying next to each other in the evening in bed, and Marty is, God knows what she's doing. God knows.
I'm working on
probably
something.
Reading quantum physics or writing it or something. But I know what I'm doing. I'm scrolling Instagram like a normal person, okay? And Marty's little beady eye of attention drifts over to my phone. People who aren't like you know, well, I don't know. I don't know what anyone's like, but for me, scrolling is a very loose attention. I just like the things go by, and every now and again some little part of me goes, I wonder what that is, and I will stop. But mostly it's just like a meditative, there it all goes. Easy come, easy go. Not Marty. The second her little beady eyes land on the phone screen, mid-scroll, she immediately says in her little voice, "Is that a real monkey?"
Pretty much always.
Is that a real monkey? And I was struck by this, Marty, because what you were looking at the moment when you said, "Is that a real monkey?" was literally a photograph of a birthday cake with Taylor Swift's face on it as art.
Oh, are Taylor Swift fans going to attack me now? I really thought it was a real monkey. I wanted it to be a real monkey.
It was a cake. But while I've got you on animals and real monkeys,
always.
We were having a conversation the other day, and I just have to crowbar this in. Sorry, because I need to process it myself, what happened, because it is just in my mind, the mystery just goes on and on. We're talking idly about maybe something we might want to do on a future episode of the podcast, and I'm in the bath, as I so often am when we're having these sorts of conversations. I'm in the bath, Marty's sitting on the bathroom floor, la 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 la, and we're thinking, we could talk about this, we could talk about that. And then suddenly Marty goes, it reminds me of how birds get angry if you feed them too much. And then her little eyes lock on my eyes for a minute with deep significance, and there's just this silence in the room that falls. And then suddenly she goes, "We're getting some really good stuff here. I need to write this down." And she grabs her computer and opens it.
Birds get angry if you feed them. At least raptors do. I don't know about songbirds, but it's fascinating, right? It's fascinating. What else? What would you rather think about than that?
Like almost anything.
Angry raptors, their owners are trying to feed them to placate them, and the birds are like, "I've had enough," and they attack. Oh, it's fantastic.
So it does beg the question, though. What are you trying to figure out this week?
I am trying to figure out, and this is it has taken many, many months, years of dealing with this in public before I actually said too much about it. But it's time I reckon
this is a safe space.
Okay. I glued it in place before we started, but already it's happening. My piece of hair. I have a piece of hair that creeps onto the center of my forehead away from all the other hair, no matter what anyone does. Hairstylists have used their blow dryers and their magic wands and their incredibly tar-like substances to try to glue my piece of hair in place. I mean, it is sprayed within an inch of his life. And sure enough, I haven't touched it since we started. The piece of hair is already migrating to the middle of my head. And it's always, if my hair sort of blew, it froofed across, it would be kind of cool. But it's not like a fringe of hair. It's just a piece of hair. And it's because
Sorry. I just want to bring to your attention the fact that it might be that piece of hair is like the brave soul going against the mainstream culture of the rest of the hair on your head.
Well, apparently it's also widowed because it's called a widow's peak that makes it do this. Oh. And I got so frustrated last week. I was trying to figure out how to tell somebody how to put the piece of hair so it doesn't migrate.
Somebody like a passerby?
Anyone at this point. Freaking squirrels are doing better than I am. So I looked up widow's peak and it's really frightening. I thought I just had a hair that went a certain way. Turns out I'm super abnormal. And it said to me online, hair growth on the forehead is suppressed in a bilateral pair of periorbital fields. I was like, yes, speaking of physics, I've got a whole physics experiment going on my head. God is doing a physics experiment, and I have a piece of hair that crawls out in front of me no matter what I'm doing. I'm always in interviews with Oprah or Anderson Cooper, I'm trying to get the piece of hair to just go back where it came from, but it never will. Parted on different sides. The piece of hair always migrates. I don't know what to do, so I just decided to to come out, and everybody sees it. I might as well talk about it.
So interesting because, I feel like in a way you've hit on something quite universal, which is where people get frustrated by their own hair. But you've managed to make it as uber nerdy as it's possible to make it by using the phrase
periorbital fields.
Bilateral pair of periorbital fields.
Yeah.
And that's probably what the physics that you were doing while I was scrolling past Not a Real Monkey is you were learning about periorbital fields, which is both super intellectual and super not. It's the paradox of you. I love it.
It's called
stupid
you. Smart.
Stupid smart.
Somehow I'm stupid, but in a smartish way.
Yes, you are. That's exactly it. Also the opposite.
Yes. I'm stupid, but in a more smartish way. And the piece of hair is always trying to crawl out of my head and tell people that. And they get the message. I'm the only one. We all pretend. It's not happening. So embarrassing. I'm never going to really figure it out, but I thought I'd at least fess up.
Accepting that you have a problem is the first step.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. We'll be right back with more Bewildered. We don't say this enough. We are so glad you're a bewildered listener, and we're hoping you might want to go to the next level with us, by which I mean if you rate and review the podcast, it helps new people find us so we can keep bewildering new souls, and you know how much we love that. Ratings are very much appreciated. Obviously, the more stars you give us, the more appreciation is forthcoming. Reviews are quite simply heaven, and we read every one and exclaim over them, and we just love you all. Mwah. So anyway, how about we get on to today's topic?
A topic? What a great idea.
Yeah, and we thought we'd talk about the times that we've gone outside the culture and how it felt.
Yes, and not just outside, but in the words of the poet laureate of this show, Ani DeFranco, she's right. She's a she, right? She's not a they, is she?
No, she's a she.
She's a she. She wrote in one song that Ro knows the title of.
Splinter.
Oh, yeah. It's a really, really good song. And part of her summary is basically culture is really going to mess you up. But remember, you can always go outside. And then she adds, really, really, really far outside.
Yeah, and you know that what she's really saying is get bewildered.
Bewildered.
Yeah.
Come to your senses, not to consensus. Yeah, she's like
all that stuff.
On our wavelength. Yeah.
She's totally on our wavelength. So we thought we'd talk about times that we've gone really, really, really far outside the culture today, just because I think the practice of storytelling of this stuff it makes us feel freer, and hopefully it will make you feel freer too.
And as we were discussing it, I thought this is really, it's the basis of the whole podcast, but also of our entire life.
Yeah.
And we always say, what does the culture say about our topic? Well, about this topic, going really, really, really far outside, the culture says one thing: don't.
No, stay inside.
Don't do it. Yeah.
Stay inside. It's safe there.
But and sometimes we've done that and it hasn't felt good. And sometimes we haven't done that and it has felt good. Yeah.
So
is that a real monkey?
Is that a real monkey though? So let's tell some stories, Marty. Let's kick us off with, do you have a good one about going really, really, really far outside?
Yeah, I think the first time I was really aware of doing this, I was in college. I was still in college and I had a baby. I was in graduate school and I had a new baby. So my then husband and I, we had no money. We spent literally all our money on a laser printer. So we didn't have a car or anything.
Smart, stupid / stupid smart.
Yeah. So a friend of ours had gotten these tickets to go on a whale watching expedition in Boston Harbor. They were very expensive tickets and he couldn't go, he and his wife. So he gave them to us and we were like, wow, this is so cool. And is that a real whale? I was obsessed. So on the appointed day, we show up and it is one of those gray Boston days that freezes you so hard. There's not a cell in you that's not frozen solid. And we go to the wharf and it smells like dead fish. And the boat is pitching wildly all in the harbor. And tourists are already vomiting off the side. And we just looked at the boat and we looked at each other and then we turned around and walked the other way. And we didn't say anything for 45 minutes. We just kept walking straight into Boston. We'd come on the subway from Cambridge. And we spent that entire day. It was a whole day whale watching expedition. And all we did was just ramble through Boston, going wherever we wanted. We had this little baby. And every now and then, my ex-husband would stand watch in a park somewhere. And I would go under some bushes and nurse the baby and put her back together under my coat. And we'd trudge on. And we decided on this whole story to tell the guy who gave us the tickets that we had in fact gone whale watching. And we said, the boat was, we saw that boat. Yeah, the boat was something. Yeah.
I remember it was definitely red.
Yeah. And the ocean was so choppy and gray.
Really wet, as I recall. Wet, salty.
It was damp. Did we see whales? Maybe.
It's hard to say for sure.
But then every time after that, we decided there was something we were supposed to do or we planned to do, and neither of us really wanted to do it. We'd just look at each other and go, "You want to go whale watching?" And that meant just running off-piste, off turf into wildness somewhere. It was great fun.
I know why this is such a good thing to do, to tell these stories, is that you've really, for me, evoked that feeling of, when you make the decision to do something naughty and there's that rush, that adrenaline thing of oh, we're going against the culture. And don't you think maybe that adrenaline rush is sort of our little clue from the universe? Yes.
Remember when we were in Austin and we were going to go see the sights of Austin?
Yeah.
And we didn't.
We went whale watching in the hotel room.
Yes.
No, it was the thing that's tricky in these situations that Marty won't say is that we were staying in a hotel. She was doing a speaking event in the hotel. So basically everyone else in the hotel had seen her speak that morning because it was a corporate thing. I don't know. It was their annual something or other. We don't really know about these things. They went there. Marty spoke to them. They loved her. But sometimes, and I don't blame people for this, but sometimes they just love her a bit too much. And then it can get real scary to be in the hotel if you're Marty, because suddenly people just bear down on her with their life stories trembling in their throats.
On my introverted self.
Yeah, and so we didn't go out. Well, actually, I went out.
You went out once.
Yeah,
to
I went out
purloin
once.
flesh.
I have the advantage of not being recognizable, so I was just like undercover, and I should say, like, we don't these days we don't eat a lot of meat. We're moving towards a more plant-based lifestyle, but at this time, it was the ketogenic years. It was a crazy time. Everyone was doing it.
You had insulin resistance really badly. You couldn't eat. We had to eat,
And you just are codependent and couldn't let me do anything that you would not let a carb pass your lips for many years.
Nope.
Luckily, we got over it. But at the time, it was just like we were in Austin and I was fetching us a lot of meat at a barbecue joint up the street. Oh, my God, it was
all
so
kinds
good.
of meat.
And so I just got this bag. I can remember the heft of this. I'm so sorry, vegetarians and vegans. I'm so sorry.
It's wrong. It's wrong.
I know how bad it is. But I brought that meat back up and we spread it. So we're disgusting. We spread it over the bed.
Well, we put a towel down first. We knew it was going to be.
We put something like
ugly.
We didn't make a terrible mess, but we did, have a bed picnic of meat.
A bed meat picnic. That could be taken a lot of different ways, I think.
Yeah. No, just the most literal way. Yeah, it was fun. It was fun.
Yeah. But I'm not the first time you ever did that. Like, I wasn't the first person to drag you off culture, was I?
Oh, God, no. I've always liked abandoning culture. And I remember my friend, the thing is I don't tend to have the proper like guilt thing with it. So like when I was a teenager and my friends and I would cut school, I'd just make sure I told my mum about it ahead of time in case the school called or something. And we literally would say to our parents, we're taking a mental health day on Thursday. And sometimes we went sailing on our tall ship that we used to sail on. And sometimes we had this thing where I think you have to be a teenager in some way to really understand this urge, but we used to get on trains and just go to where they went, like the end of the line, and then just explore a little bit, but then just get on the train. I think it's that thing of when you're a teenager and you don't have any money and you don't have anywhere to go, you tend to, and you live in the city, you tend to gravitate towards public transport. It's just like a room to be in while you gossip.
Or tall ships. I mean, you just threw that away.
Ships.
Just to be clear, you and your friends did not own a tall ship. Because
we did.
Go sail our tall ship.
Yeah, we did own it. It was like we'd all gone in for a tops of schooner together in a crazy. We actually won it in a card game. Crazy days down on the wharves.
I would believe it.
No, we were volunteer sailors on an original 1903 topsail schooner called the Alma d'Opel, and it was great times. So yeah, sometimes we did that when we needed a bit of mental health, and sometimes we just
ships and
did
trains, basically 19th century transportation forms where you're.
Now that you mention it, yeah.
If you had like a donkey, you probably would have ridden that all over as well.
Yeah, but if we'd had hovercrafts, like forget about it.
No. We're going old school.
Yeah, totally old school. But I love, you've got this story, I don't know if you've told it this way on the podcast before, but about how in a way your whole life's trajectory has been like a series of weirdly going really, really, really far outside the culture.
Because if you start really, really, really far inside, the way a very rigid religion will make you, I mean, you had no guilt. I had enough guilt for 10 of you. Aww. I remember like the first time I really went outside I was a freshman at Harvard, and I was doing a lot of all-nighters, and I did these without caffeine because caffeine is not.
Oh my God.
Yeah, it's not okay for Mormons. And so one day before a test, I was so exhausted and I really wanted to do well on it. I was so tired. I actually got a coffee-flavored yogurt. And I what?
There
was coffee-flavored yogurt in the Science Center cafeteria.
Oh my
and
God.
I got it hoping that there was enough caffeine to give my brain a little lift. But
was that like a God loophole? Like there
wasn't.
Will be no coffee, but there will be coffee-flavored yogurt?
No. It was just sin. It was straight up sin.
Then why didn't you get a goddamn latte?
Because coffee flavored yogurt for me at the time was really, really, really far outside. I'm not even kidding. I'm not even kidding. You have no idea.
No, I don't. I really don't know how far inside
I think
you
it
have
has
to be.
a slingshot property where if you pulled back far enough as a child, you zing forward as an adult. Because then I went on to go outside every culture I was in. Once I got okay, forget religion. I'm a Harvard intellectual. Then I chose to keep a child with an intellectual disability, with Down syndrome, which took me really, really, really far outside Harvard culture. Then I retreated to Utah because I thought everyone would understand. And they did understand about the baby. What they didn't understand was that I was also a lesbian. So I went to, and then
Is that a real lesbian?
Yeah, and then lesbianism became passé, and I was in the center again, and then you showed up, and now we're in a throuple. So let me
recap.
Let me break this down for you. I went to Harvard to have a child with an intellectual disability. I went to Utah to come out as a lesbian. Then I left Mormonism and started practicing polygamy. I am going really, really, really far outside any rule you want to give me. That's how it is.
No one could beat that.
I intend to. Don't know what's next, but something.
What's the next frontier?
I don't know.
Oh, what's the next frontier? It's very exciting.
Tell them what you told me about India and the thrill.
In India, there were so many ways that, because when you're in quite a different culture, you get experiences of being really, really, really far outside your own culture. But never will I be able to recreate or re-experience the high of the first time I picked my nose in public. I remember it like it was yesterday.
It was yesterday, honey.
No, that's just the most recent, honey. This is the first.
Okay, sorry.
Yeah, I was in some town in Rajasthan, and I had been noticing everyone. I was traveling by myself, right? I was 25, and I had noticed that you're picking your nose, there's no taboo, there's no problem. Also,
shocking. Urinating
in public if you have the kind of plumbing that makes that easy to do. But not if you don't. Anyway, so people are just picking their nose. And at some point I thought, I'm gonna try it. And I was sitting outside in an open area, imagine a town square, for want of a better way of describing where I was. And there's people everywhere because there's always people everywhere. Everywhere. And so I'm just like, oh my God, I'm going to do it. I'm actually going to do this. And so I did. I picked my nose in public. People saw me. Their eyes just went past me.
Amazing.
No, nothing. No interest. Nothing out of the ordinary happening here. Marty, I felt so alive. I felt like anything was possible. I felt released from the shackles of everything that kept me down. It was like the man was finally I've exorcised the man from myself.
Out of your nose. You picked the man out of your nose.
Oh my God. What's the thing that you said about picking your nose? Your kids, you said about masturbation.
Yes, this was my plan. If my kids ever asked me about masturbation, which they never did, they were far more savvy than I ever was. But I was planning.
I didn't know that this was just a plan.
That if they ever asked me about it or attempted to do it in in a place that wasn't a public square where people's eyes would go off, just slide across it, I would tell them, sweetheart, that is like picking your nose. We all do it, but in private. Simple.
I love that.
You don't build up a whole huge thing about it. When I was growing up in Mormonism, there was a pamphlet to help people, teenagers, keep themselves from masturbating. And they literally suggested tying one hand to your bed frame and then holding a Book of Mormon in the other all night long.
Oh my God, that is the kinkiest thing I ever
right?
heard.
It just takes an ordinary thing and makes it really filthy.
That's amazing.
And then it literally said at one point, If that doesn't work, get out of bed and go downstairs and make yourself a sandwich, even if you're not hungry. So, yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah, it's so fun going outside when the inside has been that weird.
Yeah, right. But in a way, like all cultures' insides are weird. Do you know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
I talk about the India stuff because it was such a marked contrast. So in Australia, I had a nose ring, like not just a stud, but a ring in my nose.
Well, no wonder you had to pick it. That's a lot of
God,
hardware
don't even
up
get
in
me
there.
started. Oh, it's so true. Stuff gets stuck up there. It is. It does. It takes maintenance, but that's not what I'm here to talk about right now. I'll discuss it privately with anyone who really wants to know the detail. But yeah, so I wore this nose ring, and it wasn't long before I left India, so I must have been somewhere in the south, I think. Anyway, I was walking along the street and this old, lovely lady stops me. She's got her sari on and she was carrying all these bags but she just started talking to me, not in English, about my nose ring. She was pointing to it. She was pointing to her own nose ring that she had, and she was clearly just like, that's beautiful. And I was like, this is supposed to be my rebellion, bitch. Like, no, I wasn't. I was actually felt like a very deep moment of connection.
Aww.
But what was fascinating, and I swear to God this is true, is that like 2 weeks maybe later, I had gone for some reason to Bishkek, Kyrgyzstan, and I was on the street in Bishkek. It was freezing. There was snow everywhere. And an old lady, I swear to you, Marty, I'm not making this up, came up to me on the street and started like busting my balls about my nose ring. And again, not in English. And again, it was very clear what was going on. It's like, it was like a message, you know, of how fickle culture is and how anything is anything. Like
arbitrary.
Nothing is anything. Yeah. Pick your nose, pierce your nose. It doesn't, and people think that it is genuinely intrinsically disgusting to pick your nose.
Like a moral wrong.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or a moral right.
Right.
And it's just an arbitrary nothing.
And in case people think that Indians are just awesome about everything, try being a left-hander who's not used to you can only eat in public with your right hand and accidentally do a little eating in public with your left hand. And then you'll see the other side. Like the eyes did not go past me when I forgot myself and started eating with my left hand one time.
Okay, but at this point we are verging on the biological.
No, I appreciate that, but
what left hands are used for.
I am from a toilet paper community, so it's not such a. Anyway, what I wanted to say to them was, that's just culture because I am from a toilet paper community.
Yeah. But you can't, once you're in the culture and they're all staring and pointing at the scarlet letter when you're, and it has an L for left hand.
Yeah.
You can't
and seriously, the shaming, like I was so horrified when I saw people looking at me and I didn't understand why, and like pointing and whispering, and I realized what it was and what they thought. And I was, and I hold my fork in that, it's nothing. It's just, everything's arbitrary.
The shaming. And it's different. And you hit the ground in different places, different scenarinos, as my oldest child used to call them when she was tiny, when they were tiny. And you have to learn the local culture, right? So,
yes.
Remember the time we hit Hollywood thinking we were fine? And we
Hollywood thinking we were fine.
And promptly found out we were not. Very few people in Hollywood really feel like they're okay because it is filled with Barbies, right? And Kens.
In fairness, Marty.
Yeah.
Let's be clear. You were fine. You were fine.
I had my piece of hair to deal with, Ro.
Oh, for God's sake.
But you had more, I have to say. You have great hair, but at that point,
I think we've talked before about the time that I spontaneously shaved all my hair off. after a difficult.
Only started with
day.
kitchen shears. It wasn't.
Yes.
Shaving is a very polite word for what you did to your hair that day.
Well, you cleaned it up after.
I did. I had one of those little zzz things.
Yeah. But yeah, I had a difficult day and I cut all my hair off, and then Marty tidied it up.
She
In
called me on the phone
retrospect,
and said, "Marty, I've done something really bad." Because culturally, it's a bad thing, even though it really isn't. But go on.
yeah. At the moment, when I took the shears to my hair in a fit of rage, I wasn't thinking ahead necessarily to the time in I don't know, 10 days from then when I would be walking into a meeting in a Hollywood room with Hollywood people, including at least three really famous people.
Yeah, really famous and really beautiful women.
And you know how my hair, it's not like, you know, Sinead O'Connor, like you can do a shaved head. The problem for me is that, you know, I went grey very, very young, and there's a weird kind of like when you actually see it, the whole thing, and I'm not dyeing anything. It's horror. There's just like weird splotches of what's grey and what's whatever colour it used to be. And so we couldn't let that happen. Once you'd cleaned it up that day, we couldn't just let that be as it was, because that was truly horrifying. In any culture, people would just be like,
yeah, it was definitely, the kitchen shears cut would not go. Even in the Garden of Eden, they would have shrieked and run from you.
So we went through, I feel like we must have talked about this on the podcast before.
It did express your rage, that haircut did.
Yeah.
It just said rage when you walk into the room. Anyway.
But what had happened at that point was we'd been trying to deal with the colour situation, like the splotchy salt and pepperiness, very uneven. So we had a weird day. I'm not going to go into it because I'm pretty sure we've talked about it before, but where we drove back and forth from our ranch into town, which is about 50 minutes each way, getting different hair, like going to CVS and getting different hair dye things. We went and got bleach. I bleached it. That was bad.
Oh, bad.
We went back in and we got blue.
Really blue.
I blued it. Wasn't what I was going for. Or at least
not a little blue. It was really blue.
Yeah.
We have talked about this, I remember.
Yeah. So anyway, but then the blue, I just washed and it went kind of orange.
Yeah, weirdly orange.
Weirdly orange, but in like at that sort of henna way where you can still see the splodgy bits where they're different colours naturally, because there's a splodge of grey and then
where I tried to dye it orange over the blue to make it brown, as if I were mixing paint, and it did not act like paint. It went, and you looked like you had moss on your head.
It wasn't good. It wasn't good at all, looking back. So we wake up, like fast forward really not that many days, and we're in LA and we're in a hotel room and we're about to go to this meeting. And I've agreed to, it's all about Marty's stuff. It's about, you know, it doesn't matter what it was about, but it was to do with Marty's work. And, but I was expected to be there. I wasn't getting out of it. So we're like, what are we going to do about this whole situation of the headular region? And Marty's like, I've got it. In the same way she said, oh, I know how to mix paints. We'll just dye it this color and it will magically, because that's what paints do. She's like, oh, no worries. I've got eyeliner. Was it eyeliner?
It was an eyebrow pencil. We finally figured out. At first we tried that spray dye that dudes are supposed to use. And it was horrible. It was like when Rudy Giuliani started to sweat and the dye dribbled down his face. It was that kind of dye.
It was that exact stuff.
It was not.
That was a different part of the trip, which we talked about last time when we came over here to look at a house. But this was the same trip, but earlier on when we were still on the West Coast. And it was at that point we were into eyebrow pencils. So Marty coloured in my head as though she were colouring in a colouring book.
Yep.
But she had an eyebrow pencil.
I just coloured her head dark brown.
Yeah.
And we went. And whether people knew or not, I do not know. I'm not going to ask them. I'm just out about my piece of hair. I cannot go there yet. Yeah. But it was intense.
I give myself props that whatever I looked like that day, and there is no photographic evidence of how I looked, I feel like I carried off the intending to look this way. This is what I'm going for. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. At least
the thing that we've always had in those sorts of situations is that we've been together at least, right?
Yeah. I guess we have our own little consensus, right?
Yeah. We build another little culture, and because I live my life by the wisdom of internet memes and Ani DeFranco, I have an internet meme that says the most important thing about any relationship, romantic or platonic or familial, and ours is all three.
Yes, it is.
Is that you gotta be in cahoots. You gotta be in cahoots.
Yes, you do. There's culture, and then there is the cahoot. And we got cahoots. I wouldn't typically do with kitchen chairs to my head what you did. So it's not like we had an obligation to chop off our hair. It's just that we fully accepted each other's weirdness. I think that qualifies as cahoot.
Yeah. And you walked by my side into that room.
I did.
You stood by me.
Proudly. So we've been, actually our cahootness, the fact that we're always in cahoots.
Our cahootitude?
Yes, our cahootitude. And I hope this is true of us and some of our listeners. They're in the same cahoot.
You're in our cahoot.
It makes culture matter less because the cahoot is not a new culture. It's an acceptance of difference. So, so the culture starts to matter less. Yeah.
I really think we're going to have to do something with this language. Like, we're all in a cahoot, the listeners and us.
I like this. Let's figure it out after a brief pause.
So we thought that we don't want to leave the elephant in the room to go by.
Did you learn to do that in India too? just let it go by.
It's not that much space. Just get out of its way. It's living its own life, for God's sake. The furthest outside, it's so funny because it's the elephant in the room, but we're talking about the furthest outside that we've ever been, that we continue to be, God help us, is in our weird platonic, romantic, familial cahoot
and
that we live
cahoot.
in.
Yeah, we have all forms of relationship going on in a single cahoot.
Yeah.
And it's people, I think people think that we're like tough and don't care because we're in a lesbian throuple. Like, what do we care about? Yeah, but we do. That's the thing. We're horribly obsessed with pleasing people. And it's not that easy to like be in this weird, cringy thruples, like situations where it's really hard to like explain it.
Yeah. And yet maybe the fact that this was the only way that we could figure out how to be genuinely happy in our lives is to also be in this situation that puts us in like perpetual discomfort.
Yeah, that's true.
In any mainstream cultural situation. Like, you've got to like enrolling our daughter in a preschool or any of those sorts of things. There's just constantly this thing of like having to navigate it and what terms do we use. So it is always this thing. And but in a way
it forces us to be okay.
It forces us. Yeah, like if we've gone really, really, really far outside. Yeah. And that's something and it's in something that we can't compromise on because it's our very deep happiness.
Right.
And it's the center. So because of that, I think we're more able to push other boundaries of culture, right?
Yeah,
because this one is non-negotiable. We're always outside anyway.
Wandering on the ice outside of culture. Together, though. So
yeah. But, like, it is awkward. It's not like we're here, we're queer, get used to it. It's like we're here, we're queer. You're a little bit more queer than that. No, keep going. Still queerer. No. Queerer. Look, you're never going to get used to this. But we are here. And we're sorry.
You'll never get used to this. We're not used to it. Good luck, people. It's so funny. Oh, my gosh. Remember when we first got together in this little tiny, it was a 4-room house, not a 4-bedroom house, a 4-room house on the edge of a national park in California, 50 minutes away from the nearest town. And your mother came to visit. So we're trying to carry on this lesbian throupleship while your very, very perceptive and intelligent mother is living in one room of the 4 rooms. And we're with no distractions and no noise. There's no traffic, nothing. And we were trying to hide everything from her in a house designed by nudists. It was nothing but glass.
It was no big deal. I thought it all through. All I needed to oh my God. All I needed to do was just come out of the French doors in the bedroom and just walk around the outside of the house to the other. There was another external door in another room where I conceivably could have slept. And then walk out of that room as though, good morning, Mom. Sleep well? I sure did. But what I hadn't thought through when I thought through this brilliant plan is that not only was the nudist designed house fully glass, but the path I had to walk was really loose gravel.
It was so loud.
My mum is sitting there. Oh God, it's so embarrassing. At the breakfast island, what do you call it? The kitchen island, having a cup of coffee. And I'm walking not that far away.
Scrunch.
And she's only that far away, but I've really committed to it. And so I just am looking down, looking straight ahead. We're literally just here and here. It was I was forcing her to pretend something absolutely incontrovertible wasn't happening. It was so bad.
It was so bad.
And it went on and on because it was a long, and it was
she was there for a long visit.
Crunch. Oh God. And we never talked about it on that trip. Well, I went back to Australia or do you want to
God bless her for not saying anything. I know, we thought we were pulling it off.
I did not. I knew her better than that, but I was very grateful for her silence. And then there was a trip where I was back in Australia by myself, and I just said, one night we were chatting and I said something like, so speaking of things that we haven't really talked about that much, me and Karen Marty. And she went, yeah. And I went, yeah, so. And she's like, does this mean next time we don't have to do the thing with the gravel? I died.
Oh.
I died. Oh,
see, that's why you can go really, really, really. I mean, once you've gone that far outside and sat with your mother and looked at her squarely in the face and had to deal with this, you're kind of beyond it after that.
I mean, if I had any real chops like I pretend to have, we would have just told her. But I wasn't ready. I wasn't ready.
No, and really, I actually think I wouldn't. Even Karen, who was actually the ringleader of the Kahoot. Nobody thinks they think she's the normal one. No, do not be deceived.
Can we make her write a memoir called The Ringleader of the Kahoot?
Yes, and we could. But I thought it would be called Karenthetically Speaking.
This is our new. You know how we used to have Karenisms, listeners? We're now going to call these Karentheticallys or Karenthetically Speakings.
Anyway, she's the really weird one. Trust us, and. Even if we hadn't been physically away from culture, in this tiny house in the woods with no roads going through past, I mean, there were no people. We were genuinely, really, really physically far outside the culture. And I think that enabled us to get together because we'd been there for a while, and it starts to fall off you.
Yeah, if we'd had to, if we dated, you know what I mean? What if we dated and we went out for dinner? It's table for 3.
No.
Can you imagine? So it just couldn't have been. But it was all just without social context. It was without cultural context. And so we didn't have to name it for a long time. We didn't have to justify it or describe it, which is probably why I couldn't at that time when my mum came. I couldn't acknowledge it because I think I still didn't have language for it. I still don't have good language
that's
for what we have because
I
I don't see a model for it.
I don't either. I just know it's really, really, really far outside.
It's really far
and
outside.
I love that there's this guy who studies myth. I forget his name, but he says culture is 3 days deep. Once you've been away from culture for 4 days, you start to lose language and you start to lose the rules. And we'd been so far outside culture for so long, it did not seem strange. It would have seemed very bizarre not to get together. Because from my perspective, because the natural connection seemed to be so obvious somehow.
It so clearly wanted to happen.
Yeah.
Like we would have had to be very strong to resist it, I guess.
But I will
everything
say,
about that ranch was outside.
And here's the thing. The reason that I was there was that I went really, really, really far outside because this is so weird. I would see this ranch, not in dreams, but in a hypnagogic state when I was halfway between sleep and waking. I would see that I was living on a ranch in California. And this has been happening for like 20 years. I know this is a real curveball if you haven't heard this. But this is the way I live my life. I kept seeing this ranch and knowing I was going to be there. And then I finally knew it so well that I was able to go on Zillow and find it. And it cost absolutely all the money I had in the world. But at least I had that much money in the world. I was not going there to ranch. I just got this ranch because it sort of appeared in my dreams. And then
like ranch noun, not ranch verb. Thank you.
Right, ranch noun, ranch verb is alien to me. I didn't know what the hell I was doing. And it was
so even the process of finding it and purchasing it was really, really, really far outside.
Really far. And I had to make up reasons I was doing it, even for myself. And then I made up such convincing reasons for it. It's magical. It's amazing. And it was. And I will never, ever regret it. We wouldn't be together, I think, if I hadn't done that.
Yeah.
But then after we got together, it felt like, okay, now we move. And yes. And people were really distraught because they had come into the cahoot. And now I was changing the rules again.
Yeah. And the thing about a cahoot, what you've got to keep as a cahoot so that it doesn't become a culture is don't let things like once it will start to tend towards becoming a culture and it will start creating mythology and you're a natural storyteller and you would begin to weave the ranch into the stories that you told in books when you spoke to groups and people were in the cahoot but they wanted it to be a culture because they wanted it to be more solid. Yeah. And so they turned the stories that you were telling into a mythology. No, you partly turned them into a mythology.
Oh yeah.
But then the cultural urge that people have started turning it into law. So Martha is not extractable from the story of the ranch. This is and so must it ever be, right?
Right. It has to be that way forever.
Yeah, and people did. It freaked people out when you said you were moving and you were like, but I did that part.
Impermanence. Any Asian philosophy will tell you the first thing to accept about the world is that everything's changing all the time.
Yeah, and then you have no... Guys, if you're freaked out about real estate, wait till we tell you about death.
Right. Jesus. Did we mention? Yeah, so, And the throuple thing wasn't part of any new myth. I mean, we were always looking for the thing that was pulling us outside, and it's very interesting that the pandemic made it so hard to go physically to other places. Yeah. And like Bo Burnham, this comedian, made this brilliant show about the pandemic, and he called it Inside. We all had to be inside. We had to go inward. But we literally had to physically stay inside. And I think that it was almost, as I was saying, if you get pulled back far enough like a slingshot, it shoots you forward later. Because I've noticed that since the pandemic, I have more of an urge to go outside. And for me, that's saying something.
Interesting. And we do go really, really far outside. Like what we're trying to, our project with this podcast is that we're trying to go really, really, really far outside, right? And like our Costa Rica retreat that we're dreaming up at the moment, that we're hoping to bring your listeners along, is about getting really, 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 really far outside.
And Costa Rican jungle outside.
Jungle. And, you know, we're planning this life that's going to be lived more in seasons than in culture, quarters. That's quite a good thing, isn't it?
Yeah,
seasons,
forget
not
quarters. Let's do seasons.
Yeah, so we're always trying to go further outside, even when it's fucking freezing, like in Boston.
Yeah, but if you happen to have, if you're able to go to wherever is warm and green, that's even better. But anytime you're feeling crushed in, overwhelmed, pulled apart by culture, it's like, it's as simple as going outside, right? And I love the Australianisms about it. Let's get rugged up. Let's get kitted out and go to the outback or the
get your trail mix.
Headed for the billabong. I have no idea what a billabong is.
No, billabongs are okay, but you've got to look out for the bunyips when you're there.
Oh God. Yeah. Okay, that'll be our next episode.
All right.
And in the meantime,
go outside to the places where we can
stay wild.
Really, really, really wild. We hope you're enjoying Bewildered. If you're in the USA and want to be notified when a new episode comes out, text the word WILD to 570-873-0144. We're also on Instagram. Our handle is Bewildered Podcast. You can follow us to get updates, hear funny snippets and outtakes, and chat with other fans of the show. Bewildered is produced by Scott Forster with support from the brilliant team at MBI. And remember, if you're having fun, please rate and review, and stay wild.